Hello and welcome to the Terrace Scottish Football Podcast. This is Craig Telfer, and as usual, I am joined by my close associate, Shaughan McGuigan.
Hello there.
And you know what happens when the Sanjay Shah and the Raju Datla of the Terrace get together? That's right. One of us is the CEO of the software company Vistex. The other is the company president. And when we're at a party celebrating Vistex's 25th anniversary, we are going to be lowered from the ceiling in a cage. A cable is going to break and the cage will fall 20 feet to the ground. One of us will be killed immediately and the other one will die 6 months later. And while one of us is strapped to a life glug for half a year, we're going to have a little chat about lower league Scottish football.
How did the kind of second person to pass away, how did they manage to cling on for 6 months?
I don't know, Shaughan. The Wikipedia article of people who have unusual deaths didn't really go into too many details about either of their medical histories.
It feels like you're really dipping into like maybe kind of like Asian duos, or like you're certainly going foreign. It feels like that's what you've done recently.
I can't imagine there'll be anyone listening who will have heard of Sanjay Shah or Raju Datla. They will have now.
That's good. Listen, it's an education, if nothing else. Just for myself, actually, first and foremost.
Well, certainly, like I say, it gets more and more difficult to come up with these comedy duos. I thought at the beginning of the season we'd have to abandon it completely, but here we are, still going, and we're only a third of the way through the campaign. So that's a lot of weirdos, creeps, and nerd-do-wells to reference between now and the end of the season. And then it'll have to stop. It will have to stop when we go into 26, 27. It will have to stop.
You did say that last year. I enjoyed the fact that on Monday, for something that we'll talk about in the Patreon, yep, you mentioned that now you almost spent more time trying to come up with a duo than you do like kind of researching the podcast in general.
Honestly, it's like basically for a little peek behind the curtain it's like Saturday evening really. Shaughan and I will text each other and say like, take a look at the scores. Who are the teams that you want to talk about? And we broadly agree the outline. And then on the Sunday, I will write down the introductions and watch the highlights for each of the sections. And then, basically, kind of Tuesday evening before Shaughan and I record, I'm spending hours locked in the library just trying to find duos that I can reference myself and Shaughan to. It's really quite difficult these days.
The library that is presumably right next door to your snooker room.
Yes, this is it. It's a very large one-bedroom flat that I live in. Snooker rooms, libraries, wings, whatever you want, we've got. Now, enough about my setup in the house. This is a podcast looking back at the winners and the losers from the Scottish Cup third round. There were 19 games taking place over the weekend. There would have been 20, but the game between Trinent and Inverness Caledonian Thistle was postponed due to a waterlogged pitch. Every one of those 19 games had some degree of interest and intrigue. And we are going to spend the next 80 minutes or so talking through the biggest and the best of them. Shaughan, is everything okay with you?
Yes, yeah, very much so. How are you?
So I hope you'd speak for longer there so I could blow my nose.
Yes, I am very well, thank you. Everything's
too late now. It's too late now because I've done it. I've done it. I had a pint before we jumped on as well here, so that's why I'm feeling a little bit bulbous.
Oh, did you finish work a little earlier and then go to a watering hole?
Went to my local pub, Redmond's of Denniston. I think it's one of the best pubs in the country. They do a very mean chicken nuggets, and oh brother, did I have a very mean chicken nuggets. But yeah, I'm good, Shaughan. I'm good. I'm very well. I'm chickened up and liquored up, so I'm in the best of both worlds at the moment.
Just to confirm this, you went to a pub, excuse me, got a pint obviously, and like ordered chicken nuggets, because that feels like maybe if you were a child, so like a meal that you would order for a child, some chicken nuggets.
Sorry, these are like Japanese fried chicken nuggets, so they're a bit like sort of a fancier version of chicken nuggets. It's not just like Jamie Oliver's been and giving you chicken nuggets. These are a bit more thought put into them. They're very, very nice. If you're ever in the Denniston area, do go to Redmond's. I'd highly recommend it. And while you're there, use NordVPN to access the websites that you can't because of the UK's privacy laws and be safe online. But yeah, Redmond's the Denniston. But no, Shaughan, I am very well. This is a podcast I'm looking forward to. There was a lot of good stuff that happened over the weekend and a lot of talking points. So It's really just a tasting menu, as it were, going over the more interesting stuff. But before we get going, we have unfortunately got to start with some corrections and clarifications. Yes, I thought we might get to a place where we no longer have to explain ourselves, but apparently not. Now, on last week's show, we spoke about Dougie Emery's move from Greenock Morton to Raith Rovers, and John Morrison got in touch with us on Twitter to say, weird, not a word on what will happen at Morton, not even a sentence about who Morton might be looking at. John, we forgot. We simply forgot. We had a lot to crack on with. Shaughan was talking about it from a Raith Rovers perspective. We weren't sure who Morton were going to get, but listen, you've got Billy Davis for the time being. Good luck with that. I'm going to quote Alan Partridge when he was talking about Bono. The man is mentally ill. I've seen him eat a plastic pie.
You know, some many messages, I was like, actually, that's a fair enough point. We probably should have spent 2 minutes at least on that. So apologies. But let's see how Billy Davis gets on. I suspect poorly, but we'll see.
Hey, listen, they went up to Balmoor, got a result there. That's pretty good going. Listen, at the end of the season, when Greenock Morton are finishing in 7th place and get knocked out in the next round of the Scottish Cup, they'll all look back at that result at Balmoor as where it all started.
So that's interesting that you think they will lose in the next round to Steny.
Yes, we'll come on to that and talk about the interesting games. Not to jump ahead too far, Shaughan, but we're going to do that at the very end. Look at some of the best fixtures from the 4th round. Certainly 2 that stand out. 3 now if you include Stennismere versus Greenock Morton. But I will save that for later on in the podcast. Now, I've kind of chopped this into order, so there is a degree of flowing between the points, Shaughan. But if we're going to start anywhere, I suppose we're going to start with someone who is a loser, but ultimately has emerged as a winner over the last couple of weeks, and that's John Rankin, the former manager of Hamilton Academical. His side lost 4-0 against Airdrieonians on Saturday. No real shame in that. There's a division between the teams. Airdrieonians appear to be getting their act together under the interim management of Aaron Taylor Sinclair. But very interesting, John Rankin resigned in his post-match interview. He said that he could no longer lead the players in the circumstances. And then it was revealed the night before the players hadn't been paid, but I think it was right about 5 to midnight that the money came through for them. So his position, he felt it was untenable. He's stepping down as management, and I suppose he does so with his head held high. I think his reputation amongst a lot of onlookers in Scottish football has increased. I think he's held in quite high esteem now because of probably the grace in which he's handled himself with over the past couple of months as Hamilton moved from one shambles to the next. But Shaughan, what do you think of John Rankin leaving the Accies?
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly no surprise. I think fair play to him for the fact that he has managed to, I suppose, hold out for as long as he has. I suppose, and he's had such a kind of interesting arc at Hamilton. Like, it wasn't that long ago. Was it maybe 12 months ago you went to a Hamilton game and you were essentially a kind of...
Always talk about it.
Anger voyeur.
Yes.
In terms of, in terms of how he was regarded by fans. Like, very low ebb. They would quite clearly, quite happily, I suppose. I've got rid of him at that point.
Someone that would pitch up on the crowd of eviction night in Big Brother and boo someone as they were leaving the house. I'd bracket myself alongside that kind of person.
But ultimately, we've got to a place where, like, if it hadn't been for the points deduction, that would have kept him up last season in terms of the for want of a far better word, the kind of shenanigans that have been kind of going on behind the scenes. But I think just in terms of, so when you think about all the things that he has to put up with, and I know this is like quite a silly comparison, but even just like if you're a manager if you're any kind of people manager, so if you look after a team of people, even if it's just like an office, so you have to, you maybe got 10 people, and it's like you have to manage performance and maybe behaviours. You maybe have to have conversations that you don't want to have and they don't want to have. You maybe have to give them news that you know that they're not going to take particularly well, and then you maybe have to manage the fallout of that. Now, I think as a football manager, you have all of that, then probably another 100 things. Then you kind of add on the media side. Then you add on the fact that fans have an opinion and so on and so forth. And even if you are the manager of a well-run football team, I think I think it must be such a difficult job, but to have the ineptitude that is going on behind the scenes at Hamilton, fair play to him for sticking around for as long as he had. I thought the interesting word that he used, and I thought his interview with Ben was quite almost like emotional at points.
Yeah, it was.
And I don't think he used it. I think he used it on purpose. I don't think he used this word. I think he thought about it. He said, I can't remember the exact sentence, but he said, I can't continue to be a front. I can't continue to be a front anymore. I thought it's quite an interesting way to express what maybe he feels that he has been for the last X amount of months, or maybe even X amount of years. Because let's face it, this has been an ongoing scenario. But clearly it has reached the point of no return. And as much as it's came on the back of a 4-0 defeat, I think they could have won 4-0 on Saturday, and he still would have been resigning at the end of the day.
Now, that's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is after the first and second goals went in, he thought, I've had enough. The defending there, guys, was really bad. You've not listened to anything I said to you at half-time. You've not carried out my instructions. I have to walk away. It was really that bad. But yeah, I think the front's the interesting word. If I want to talk seriously about it, the front's the interesting word because we're not really hearing from, I suppose I say we're not really hearing from, we have heard from Sheriff Sengen, and that was a pretty incendiary interview, perhaps for all the wrong reasons. Not a lot of explanation there, but certainly a lot of finger pointing at a man in a Hawaiian shirt drinking a can of Monster who really seemed to have it in for Hamilton Accies. And I suppose we're seeing the stuff from Jerry Strain on LinkedIn, which just doesn't really seem to be addressing the difficulties that Hamilton have found themselves in. So it's just really John Rankin's the only person who seems to be talking any sense. He's the one that has to field the difficult questions. He's the one that's got to explain to the players. Imagine just in your normal job, just to go back to to bring in just the real world that you did there. Imagine you wake up one morning and your wages haven't been paid. And there's no explanation for it. So everyone's texting each other in the group chat. Everyone's asking the manager. He's completely clueless as to what was going on there. And for him to try and explain away other people's, malfeasance, stupidity, nefarious actions, it's just not fair on him. And I can completely understand why he'd want to take time away, because I think that was certainly one of the most stressful environments to be in. I think as a football player, you just want to turn up and train and turn up and play and have everything else looked after you in the background. That somebody's washing the kits, for instance, somebody's putting the cones out. So when you arrive, you're getting, you go out and train, you're getting your dinner, and then you can go up the road. It's all like very routine. I think that's what football players like. They get into routine. And to not be able to provide that, it just must be shit for him. It must be just shit for every single person at the club. And I'm not saying that Rankin was quite the glue that was holding it all together, but it feels like they're in a far worse place now than they were certainly before the weekend started. I mean, Darian McKinnon, who was assistant manager, he is stepping up to manage the team on an interim basis. Scott Leach, who was very briefly part of their New Look Academy over the summer and then departed after like a month or so, he's come in as the assistant manager. And so very, very difficult times ahead for Hamilton, but it just always seems to be difficult times ahead for Hamilton.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say in terms of it's not necessarily the glue that holds the team together, but I think you're right. I think this will have a negative impact on Hamilton, and another negative impact on Hamilton. Like we've seen it in the past where a club is in financial difficulty and the manager leaving isn't necessarily a negative. Inverness, for example. But I think it's a whole different ball game. And to pick up on another point that you've mentioned there, in terms of the general ineptitude behind the scenes, I think I've alluded to this before, but I think in general, I reckon there's loads of people involved in running Scottish football teams that probably don't really know what they're doing. And what I mean by that is, I think the administrative side of Scottish football, of running a football team, is probably very complicated and quite dull. And just because you own a company that installs kitchens and bathrooms, It doesn't mean you know how to do the admin stuff of Scottish football. So I can understand why, like, maybe certain things are, in terms of the admin side of things, they're maybe put off, or they're forgotten about, or they're completely, you didn't even realise that you had to do that. And I would imagine the SPFL probably have to chase up teams at various points to say, you've not filled in this AA40AA form, and you're like, oh shit, I'll get that filled in, I'll send it across. But it just feels like most teams, almost all teams, they kind of muddle through and they get by. But the fact that Hamilton are so far away from muddling through and getting by, like they are abysmal. And I think everybody over the last kind of whatever it is, a year, 18 months, should be ashamed at how they've run that club.
It reminds me of the joke in The Office where David Brent gets a fax through from head office and he says, oh, I'm going to put that in the special filing cabinet, the waste paper basket, like that. And I can just imagine like Jerry Strain just wandering around the office making similar kind of gags. I suppose though, I mean, maybe he could tap up the guys at Real Madrid for a wee bit of a hand to help guide his club through this choppy waters. I wonder for Rankin, I was thinking if imagine Rankin will take a couple of weeks away, spend a bit of time with his family, have a rest, maybe go on holiday, or certainly just enjoy go on holiday, enjoy the festive period with his family where he doesn't have to worry about this, doesn't have to worry about, and then on top of that, doesn't have to worry about just being a football manager, can just spend time like being a dad, being a husband and whatever, reconnect with his friends, all that sort of stuff. But imagine, I think he'll probably, I don't know the guy, but imagine he'll be looking to get back into football quite quickly. And going back to the point I made right at the start, I think his stock will be quite high after what's happened there. Now, I think that there's perhaps a degree of recency bias there, that they look at how he's handled himself. And I think Hamilton have had a decent season all in. You can maybe look at that starting 11 and think, even not even accounting the points deduction, they probably should be a bit closer to Inverness at the top of the table, because it's a good starting 11, and Ollie Shaw's the top scorer in the division. But I think that they'll maybe ignore the relegation first time around with Hamilton, and maybe some of the fan unrest, that the fact he was never the most popular of guys. And I think that when it comes to, say, for instance, like the Morton job, for instance, I know that they're getting, we mentioned at the start there, they're running with Billy Davis for the time being, but I think that's just on an interim basis while they get someone in place in a full-time capacity. But I think Rankin's name will be mentioned in discussions like that going forward, and I think that it's how to say this, but it's been good for him in a way, if you know what I mean. And I don't mean that, I don't want to be smart in saying that Hamilton's demise is worked out well for him, because that's not what I mean. But I think reputationally he has come out of this quite well, and I think that might encourage other clubs to take a look at him.
Yes, I think the timing has been okay. And in terms of what you mentioned, in terms of the first relegation, I think that's the one that potential suitors would pay attention to. I think the second relegation, you say, oh, well, they got points deducted. Yeah. But I suppose even in that time, he has still managed to win a trophy. He has still managed to get them promoted. And you're right, I think in terms of even last season's relegation, it's like, well, it felt like he was turning it around, and if it hadn't been for the points deduction, they would have been fine. So you're right, I think from a timing perspective, it feels like he is in a kind of decent position to be considered for other roles. I suppose the only thing to mention in terms of a comparison is, and maybe it's completely different without knowing the details, but we said something similar when Ian Murray was given his jot from Wraith Rovers. I was like, right, well, goodness me, they finished second. Okay, and they've only had one league game. He'll surely walk into a position soon. And that's now been, whatever it is, almost 18 months. Ian Murray still isn't back into football. So yes, it might be a decent time for him, but it certainly, if you use Ian Murray as an example, it still isn't a given that he will get a role soon.
Mm-hmm. We'll stick with the concept of managers leaving their clubs, and we'll have to talk about the biggest loser from the weekend, and that's the Dumbarton manager, or certainly the former manager of Dumbarton. The former manager of Dumbarton got in one small glass of lager as well, and I'm slavering like a pub boar. We'll stick with the theme of managerial departures and we'll talk about the biggest loser of the weekend. That was Stevie Farrell. His Dumbarton side were thrashed 4-0 by Auchinleck Talbot at the Rock on Saturday. It was a cup upset, but I don't think it was necessarily a shock. I think a few people would have fancied Talbot to win this match based on the contrasting forms of either side. And the following day, Stevie Farrell was dismissed as the manager. He was appointed in 2021, and there was quite a short but quite a nice enough statement on the club website saying that he took charge of 210 games, making him the longest serving Dumbarton manager of the post-war period. And there'd been no manager that had maybe experienced as many lows with the one club and survived to tell the tale. But as we speculated on the final episode of A View from the Terrace, this match, I described it as a referendum on Farrell's future, saying that if he lost the match, Mario Lapointe, the Canadian owner, would be in with a really, really big decision to make. And subsequently, Farrell has left his job. What did you make of this, Shaughan? Was it a surprise to you that he walked? Or he was not he walked, but he left the club?
Neither the result, and what I mean by that is like Auchinleck winning, like the nature of the win, the fact that it was 4-0, that surprised me. Auchinleck winning didn't surprise me in terms of the fact that Stevie Farrell was kind of relieved of his duties afterwards. That didn't surprise me either. Kind of reading the comments on Saturday was actually starting to make me think that maybe it wouldn't be kind of jettisoned. Like there was a lot of Dumbarton fans that felt that Mario Lapointe maybe wouldn't kind of pull the lever in terms of dismissing him. And I think Mario has always been, I suppose you're not going to expect an owner to say, yep, if we lose on Saturday, then I'm going to get rid of the manager. Yeah. But it's always felt like he has been very considered. And I'm not saying that's not been the case with this decision, but it's felt like he has never really been on the verge of even considering getting rid of Farrell. So reading the comments, I was like, well, maybe they won't get rid of him. But no, the fact that this is, I mean, let's face it, Dumbarton, I know they've had 6 points deducted, but it hasn't been a great campaign so far. And the fact that Saturday might be the worst result of all time. No, I wasn't surprised in the slightest that Farrell was let go.
They lost under Steve Aitken. They were a championship team at the time and lost to Bonnyrigg. I think that was really, really bad. Mm-hmm. But this, I suppose, maybe Dumbarton fans that listen to this that come back, I probably should have checked with Fraser Clark beforehand. I think that certainly that was a match that Dumbarton were in. This was a match that they were not in. I mean, you saw the goals, the defending for the 4 goals is dreadful. Mm-hmm. I mean, the first one, the ball seems to sneak into the net, or like it's somebody sneaking into a film that started 10 minutes ago, if you know what I mean, and they don't want to disturb anyone. The second goal, the defence just stop playing. They don't play to the whistle. Third one, I had to watch this, but it was fucking like the JFK assassination, going by frame to see exactly what had happened with this one. Quite a bad mistake by Aaron Linus, and the ball breaks favourably for the Talbot striker. And the 4-0 one, just like the fourth goal, just to me, to you, defending. There's a space opens up. I think it's Christian Webster doesn't, or realises too late to go over across. So it's dreadful. And I think at the end, I mean, where the camera's positioned at the Rock, it's obviously at the middle of the ground, very close to the Talbot fans. They're going off their heads, understandably so. That's a scalp for them. But I think the Dumbarton fans, I'd imagine most of them had left by that point. Yeah. So that's why the reaction wasn't quite as furious as it had been. But after the match to for Athletic, when they lost 4-1, they were booed off the park. And there's another 4-0 defeat, and they've shipped 4 goals at home. It felt as though that was the tipping point. I think that everyone probably disappointed that it didn't work out. We've spoken a lot of the time. We say that we enjoy listening to Stevie Farrell. Seems like a nice guy. Seems quite charismatic. But it's just remarkable that all the things he's been through at Dumbarton, that he's been there to experience them, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and I suspect that if it hadn't been for the fact that Dumbarton as a club have had such an odd journey when it comes to ownership, then he actually might have been let go a long time ago. It feels like they've had owners for a long time now that ultimately aren't that bothered about how the football club fares. They just wanted to land. And that's not to say that Farrell didn't have a lot of positive times at the club, because that's not the case. He absolutely did. But there's been a lot of lows and massive lows that I think at a lot of clubs he would have been let go a while ago. And then, to be fair, I didn't think that. I thought that keeping him on was, even though the new ownership starting on -6, even though they kind of came down, and I thought it was weird how they came down. I almost felt like that Farrell waved the white flag last season in terms of, as soon as he got that points deduction, I was like, oh, I'm just going to give everybody minutes, and it's like, well, wait a minute.
I don't think it was quite early on as that. There was a game. It must have been about a third of the way into the season. It was against Annan Athletic, and Annan were the team they could have conceivably at one point caught and reeled in. They lost that match, and that opened up like an even bigger gap. And I think at that point it was like, right, like, it's just, I'm going to give everyone a game between now and the end of the season. It has to be fun for folk to come along and train and play, and they need to know in the circumstances you're going to get a shot.
But I do think he's always been very good at recruiting players. So I think keeping him in situ for this season, I thought it might have worked, but ultimately didn't have a lot of credit in the bank. And we're now into start of December, and that clearly the credit had run dry for everybody.
I think that even the most optimistic and kind-hearted of Dumbarton supporters, the kind of the weirdos that hang about the Facebook page, even they would probably have to concede that that was the time. That was too much. However, I do think though that the squad's not perfect. You know, there's a couple of glaring holes in there. I think particularly in the middle of the park. I think they're for a part-time manager, someone looking to step up, I think it'd be quite an attractive club. They feel certainly off the park in a really good place under Mario Lapointe. They're doing a lot of good stuff in terms of like number of season tickets. I imagine folk that have maybe got season tickets that were just fed up of how things were going on the pitch, they might be encouraged to come back. If they make the right appointment, you know, I think that finishing in the top 4 might be beyond them this season. If they can build on the success that they've had of things since coming out of administration, I think they could really kick on, and I think that's something that a manager would want to be part of.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think it would take an awful lot of progression for a new manager to come in and very much keep them out of bother. And I suppose that's ultimately what you want at this moment in time in terms of this season. Make sure they aren't in any relegation bother. I don't think that would take a huge amount of progression. And then I think there is. I do think like they've probably had a wee bit of a budget, even though they've been in a bit of financial difficulty. I think they've had a decent budget this season. I don't know if the cooperation agreement with St Mirren, for example, is necessarily worked out as well as they could have hoped. But I think going into next season, if they still are able to sell whatever it is, 600 season tickets, for example, and if they end the season strongly, you would imagine that probably would generate more renewals from the people that already have one. So no, I think, as you say, from a part-time perspective, I think it's a decent position and quite attractive for potential managers.
Yeah, good luck to Dumbarton and good luck to Stephen Farrell, whatever happens next to him. Now, that wasn't the only cup upset. Perhaps the biggest upset from the whole weekend was Cove Rangers' 2-1 win over St Johnstone at McDermott Park. Cove, of course, in 9th place in League One. Very mediocre campaign so far. And St Johnstone currently top of the championship and favourites to win it. And I think the big winner from this game, Shaughan, was the goalkeeper, Robbie Mutch. There's 3 saves that he made. 2 from Ikpiezu, 1 from Jamie Gullen. The header in particular from Ikpiezu is an amazing save. And it was those saves that ultimately allowed Cove to overturn Ikpiezu opening the scoring, and then Mitch Megginson taking the game to extra time, Adam Emsley getting the winner, and just a really, really strong performance from the goalkeeper here.
Yeah, I thought so. And I think watching because like obviously the game lasts 120 minutes. The highlights only lasted about 8. And I think watching the highlights, you would think that Cove, you would think that St Johnstone were the better team. And I think probably for maybe maybe an hour or so. Like they maybe were. It was interesting. There was a few comments about people that were at the game saying, well, actually the highlights weren't necessarily representative of actually how the game transpired. But you're absolutely right. In terms of if it wasn't for Robbie Mutch, then even if St Johnstone were poor, and I think they were, then the game could have been done before Cove got the equaliser with about whatever it was, 50 minutes to go. But I thought the one, I think that's the one that you're referring to, when I don't know if he headed it. I don't know if he meant to header it or if it just kind of diverted off him. But the fact that Mutch was already going the other way, then had to completely kind of like move in the opposite direction and then tip it wide. That was the best of a kind of bunch of very good saves from Mutch. Fair play to him.
Yeah, definitely. And the other big news as well at Cove Rangers, they'd signed Chris Maguire. He played the previous week. They'd also signed Greg Stewart. He left India and has joined Cove on, I think it's like a month-long deal, 6-week deal. I think it's taken to sort of the middle of January. But he came on, both of them came on at half-time substituting, and Greg Stewart made a big difference in the game, got in the SPFL's Team of the Week. I'm sure Craig Fowler had taken a keen interest in Greg Stewart's performance this one. Definitely thought he was the best man for the job. But I mean, I don't know if this could be a turning point for Cove, because I think there's a lot of time in the season where they have like picked up a positive result. They failed to build on it. You know, I think it was after they'd comfortably beaten Montrose and then just didn't win after that. And I don't know if this could be seen as a turning point for them. You bring in two experienced players that the squad is badly lacking in numbers. I know that they're maybe past their best, certainly maybe well past their best in Chris Maguire's case. But if these guys have got the fire in their belly and they can offer something, then that's surely a positive for Cove. And they're the kind of players that could, maybe Stewart in particular, even though he's only here for 4 or 5 games, you get like a decent number of points. And that could take you away from Kelty at the bottom of the table, maybe reel in Montrose and try to just build and try to get into the top 4.
Yeah, and I mean, there's lots of weird things happening around Cove Rangers at this moment in time, like everything that you've kind of read and heard about them between the start of the season and now is that, and without necessarily seeing evidence of it, like the suggestion is that they aren't in a great place financially, and yet, as you say, last week they brought in Chris Maguire. This week they brought in Greg Stewart. Not players that you would expect to see for a team that might be struggling financially. So maybe that's not the case. Who knows? Maybe that's just street talk.
Yeah,
I thought it was interesting that their website hasn't been updated since the start of November. So even though they've brought in Maguire and Greg Stewart, none of that has been mentioned at all on their website, which feels really weird. And then the other thing, which is really getting on my nerves, is the fact that somebody has linked all of their Twitter updates to Pie and Bovril. So every single thing they post, even just like a kind of minute by minute update on a game, all of their updates are going straight to Pie and Bovril. It's doing my head in. Really doing my head in.
I find it strange. I mean, Pie and Bovril's a brilliant website. It's a brilliant resource. God knows where we'd be if it wasn't for Pie and Bovril. But that's a strange use of someone's time doing that. It's like, I quite like reading what Big Keith's been up to and how deep his pockets are, and they're just like a sort of a deadbeat dad who just no interest in his kids' upbringing, but will buy them off with love. That is the kind of impression you get from Big Keith. But Richard Gordon's left the club. He, the sort of the doyen of Scottish football broadcasting, still really good, and a shame he's not doing more stuff with the BBC. But he's no longer involved with them, and it's just strange that you're not updating the website. I thought that would have been one of the easiest things to do, but maybe the money they make from their game against Kelty Hearts in the 4th round, who knows, that might be the money spinning tie. Listen, it's certainly a presentable tie. You beat Kelty Hearts, you never know who you could get there, and it might be, like an away tie against Aberdeen, something class like that, and allows you to kick on.
Do you think Richard Gordon was maybe the only person at the club that knew the password to log into the website? It's like nobody's been able to, because it ultimately coincides with him leaving, that the website has not been updated.
if I mean, I don't know the circumstances of Richard Gordon's departure, but if I left somewhere in acrimonious circumstance and I was the only person that knew the passwords, I would not be revealing them. I'd say, nah, you're going to have to take your laptop down to an expensive cybersecurity firm. They're going to have to crack it open. That's what you can do, your password manager. But if Robbie Mutch was the big winner from this game, I suppose the big loser on the opposite side is Toby Stewart, the St Johnstone goalkeeper, because it's a terrible mistake to let Adam Emsley's, I'm not even say it's well placed. The shot was on target, but it just seemed to go through him for the winning goal.
Yeah, I mean, is it Matty Folds kind of makes the initial mistake?
I mean, there's 2 points of failure in this one. I mean, the goal should never have got to that position in the first place, but that's the goalkeeper's there to cover up any mistakes, and he simply doesn't do that.
And I do think there is a concern around Toby Stewart, and he started the season really strongly. Like quite a number of impressive performances. I remember the
Dunfermline game.
Yes, Friday night game.
Yeah, it was brilliant.
Yeah, like kind of 2 or 3 saves in like the last minute. Like, goodness me. He has dipped. And I suppose what St Johnstone don't have at this moment in time, off the top of my head, is somebody who can come in and replace him. I think their only other keeper might be, is it Mitchell? I forget his first name, but I think he has played for the first team a few times and didn't look great at all. So they're one of those clubs that it feels like they're running light on goalkeepers and are ultimately dependent on their first choice being quite good. Mm-hmm. And if he's going through a tough spell, which it feels like Stewart is at this moment in time, then that puts him in a bit of a bind.
Sorry, Ross Sinclair.
Right, sorry.
Ross Sinclair is the other goalkeeper.
I suspect that they aren't too keen to bring him in. I think he didn't look particularly strong when they've used him in the past. That as I say, that puts him in a bind. But I do think in general the team, like they just feel a bit kind of, they're a bit slow, they're a bit ponderous, they're in a bit of a rut at this moment in time, and then clubs can go through that and maybe they can get themselves out of it. It feels like they've got when it comes to the number of players and the quality and depth, very few other teams in the Championship have that. But it just feels like the Valakari is struggling to, shuffle the pack to get more out of that starting 11.
One of the things that I found very interesting, I only, for the games that we're all talking about, it was the Scottish Cup highlights that I watched, which were really, really good. Nice wee, like at very most 5 minutes. And because this is a bite-sized podcast, I thought just to watch those just to get a general impression of the game. But certainly the standout thing for me watching St Johnstone 1, Cove Rangers 2, I think it was in the second half when Cove were creating a number of chances. Every time they were having a shot on goal, whether it went past the post or it was saved, there was boos. And there was a lot of boos at the full-time whistle as well. Maybe understandably so, given the fact that you've been knocked out the Scottish Cup again to lower league opposition again. And I thought it must be a strange one because St Johnstone are having a really, really strong season so far. So it's been a really strong season. But we spoke about it, Shaughan, last week when we talked about the Championship last week, it was mostly focusing on Partick Thistle because of the St Johnstone game at the weekend, Dunfermline Athletic game on the Tuesday night, so it was just easier to discuss them. But when we were talking about St Johnstone, we were talking about their spotty form, and I think that you go back to that game against Dunfermline, the 2-1 game. Remember the first 25 minutes of that match? St Johnstone were absolutely unbelievable in that game. Absolutely unbelievable. That to the extent where Dunfermline just could not get the ball out of their own half because St Johnstone were right on top of them, and they were super aggressive in what they were looking to do. Since then, however, I don't think that St Johnstone have been particularly good. I mean, you just need to look at the results. I've just got the stuff up on Soccer Base here, but they followed up. They beat Airdrie 2-1. Expected, but Airdrie gave it a right good go in that match. Queen's Park, they beat them 2-1 at Lesser Hampden. But again, Queen's Park probably unfortunate not to get something from that game. Then you go losing, draws against Ayr United, draws against Ross County. Not the worst results in the world given the fact they're decent teams. Lost to Arbroath, beat Morton, beat Airdrie, then drawn against Dunfermline. Queen's Park being 4-1 up and then almost chucking that away at the end. You know, they lost the big game to Partick Thistle, and then you're knocked out the Scottish Cup by one of the worst sides in the division beneath you.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wonder, it's jaded is the word you'd used, or sort of that was the sentiment that you were talking about. Just that there's a bit of a lack of freshness there, and I just wondered, like, I think certainly the fans. I actually just texted one today just about something else and mentioned the result offhand. Just a bit of footy banter between the lads, and it was just saying that it's just like, get the ball forward quicker and be faster with it. And I think that maybe teams are beginning to figure out what St Johnstone want to do. It is a lot of like sideways players, a lot of like just control, but maybe sterile control. Mm-hmm. And I think that when you look at, if you want to compare them to Partick Thistle are just a bit more like vertical in what they want to do. They want to get the ball. They want to beat players. You've got, like, you know, Logan Chalmers, Sonello Litsosa, guys who are just like ultra aggressive. And what I mean by that is want to get the ball up the park as quickly as possible. And St Johnstone aren't doing that. And then you chuck in somebody like who's your best player over the early season, like Josh McPake, who I think teams might have like sussed out what he wants to do. So it's a job for Valakari. I think it's a wee bit of a job for Valakari to try and pull them out of this malaise they find themselves in.
Yeah, I think it's a hard one, because I do think on another day they might have got a second goal, and then that way they probably finished cove off. But in general terms, if you compare them to Partick Thistle, for example, I think they see, in terms of the players that can play behind a striker, I think St Johnstone have better quality than Partick Thistle. So in terms of, like, Josh McPake started the season very well. Jamie Gullen started the season very well. Stevie Marlin is starting to come back from injury. You would imagine over the next kind of week or two he might get back up to speed, and he could be a key role. I'm not entirely sure of their focal points in terms of Ikpeatsu or in terms of Sidibe. Yes, they're a focal point, but I do think the players behind that are the better ones. So if you restrict their space, if you sit deep, I suppose that's where St Johnstone might struggle. In terms of Thistle, yeah, Logan Chalmers, Fitzpatrick, there's probably more width in that team, and it's just in terms of like getting deliveries into the box or maybe cutting inside and getting a shot away. But I think in terms of a focal point, as much as we sometimes speak about Tony Watt in terms of how hot and cold he can be, if you're talking about a focal point or a kind of a forward, of the three that we've mentioned, St Johnstone's two and Partick Thistle's Tony Watt, I think I maybe trust Watt in terms of like being the best of those three. So I kind of feel like Thistle might be a kind of long shot. I know we're kind of diverting from the Scottish Cup, but
yeah, but come on, bring it back to the Scottish Cup.
But I've been so impressed by Partick Thistle, but it just feels like maybe teams are now starting to get a handle on how to restrict St Johnstone, and Valakari is struggling to kind of counter that.
You got to say, though, Ikpeatsu took his goal exceptionally well. Brilliant finish.
Did he mean it?
I don't know. What I did like about it was that he kind of ran over. I think it was it Jamie Gullen that took the corner. I think it might have been, but he sort of like points to it like that was my goal. He's like, "Oh, you can have it. You can have it." Like, it kind of rolled off your heel from a yard out. Don't worry, mate. It's all yours. On top of that as well, just to finish up the point about St Johnstone, they're really shit in the Scottish Cup. Like, see, I know that's a weird thing to say, but see, since winning it in 2021, and again, I'm not sure if it counts because there was no fans there, and as we know, things that happened in the COVID period aren't necessarily canon. But they got to the semi-finals last year, okay, and they were well beaten by Celtic, like no shame in that. But then, if you like, after winning the Scottish Cup the following year, fourth round, knocked out by Kelty Hearts. The year after that, 22-23, knocked out by Rangers. Not the worst result in the world, you know. Then after that, the following year, 23-24, knocked out in the fourth round by Airdrieonians. Semi-final appearance last year, and then knocked out in the third round by Cove Rangers. So I think I need to check. I think St Johnstone have made, since winning the Scottish Cup, St Johnstone have played in the Scottish Cup more times than games they've won. Would I be right in saying?
You can't say they haven't done very well in the Scottish Cup since they won it, and then say that they got to the semi-finals.
I mean, apart from that, but like they've since won it, there's been 5 years since they've won it, and out of 4 of those 5 times they've been knocked out of the first attempt.
Well, that's not very good. But that semi-final run was good.
Yeah. I'm not disputing that. St John's is just bad at the Scottish Cup. That's my point. Now, St Johnstone were the only team dumped out by a lower league opposition. Edinburgh City came a cropper at Carmew's Park by 2-1. Ross Kavanagh opened the scoring for the Mariners at the beginning of the second half, and although Lewis MacArthur cancelled out late on, and Dean Watson scored in injury time to send the East of Scotland Premier Division crack troops into the 4th round. All credit has to go to Camelon here. I think they had 2 chances, scored with them both, maybe 3 chances. Very ruthless. But I think this is an enormous missed opportunity for Edinburgh City, and I think it might tie into some of the stuff that you spoke about last week, that running with a squad of 13 is a good laugh until it's no longer a good laugh. And I think this is the moment where that's no longer a good laugh.
Yeah, I mean, let's face it, Edinburgh could really do with getting through in the cup and then getting a good draw against a team that will make them a wee bit of money. And the fact that they've managed to lose out against that, it'll be a good Camelon team. Don't get me wrong, that's a strong side. If it wasn't for, give it a year or two, they'll be in the Lowland League and they'll probably be a good Lowland League team. However, it just felt like the perfect storms, quite in-depth highlights. So probably it was 12, 13 minutes. It felt like the perfect storm for a cup shock in terms of, I think it's Dean Shaw that was a Camelon goalkeeper. He had a good game. Edinburgh hit the woodwork 3 or 4 times. They were wasteful in front of goal. And then defensively, as you say, when Camelon were on the counter, they weren't able to deal with it at all. So yet on another day, Edinburgh maybe get the first goal and then Camelon's heads go down and Edinburgh win quite comfortably. But on Saturday, that's not the case at all. And it's good, I mean, in terms of, Michael McIndoe was very quick to praise Camelon, but you could tell how angry he was in terms of how the game had panned out. And in terms of what you'd mentioned, in terms of what we had discussed the week before, in terms of running with such a small squad. I mean, I think Eden Lynch came on, but I think by the end, was it Lewis MacArthur that was maybe kind of wandering about, kind of hobbling with an injury, and they weren't, or they didn't bring anybody on to replace him, and that's the impact that it can have. But that's it's a massive impact, because if anybody needs money from the SPFL other than Hamilton, it feels like it's Edinburgh, and they've went out at such an early point.
Yeah, I wonder, they've got an academy there, and I don't know what the reticence is to even put a couple of them on the bench. I understand it's you don't want to give young players, just stick them in there for the sake of doing it, and you're putting them on there because you have to, not necessarily because you believe they've got the qualities to augment the side and give you a different option. But even so, I mean, if you're running with the same team all the time, it's just, I'm going to use the term again, jaded. And I think that I was very effusive of my praise with Edinburgh, as I tend to be after the draw against East Kilbride when we spoke about them last. But you can't be as prolific in front of goal. You know, I know there's a clamour to go and sign a proper striker. I mean, they do need a proper striker. Let's be honest. They need some sort of focal point in front. If you're not going to play Jack Duncan up front, the centre back who's been converted into a striker, if you're not going to play him, then you need to go and get one. Jayden Ferguson wasn't the man, but I even don't think it was necessarily a lack of centre forward that cost them this game. Shit finishing.
Yeah.
Just really bad finishing. And don't want to dig the guy out, because I like him personally and as a player. There's quite just daft to Quinn Mitchell. Just, trying to, I know he's a composed player, but you're in a small tight pitch. Cameron's tails are up. You give the ball away and straight away one pass and it's in the back of the net. So didn't like seeing that.
It was interesting as well, because obviously the goal came and it was the last minute, wasn't it? 90th minute that Camelon got the winner. But it was the fact that it came from an Edinburgh free kick, roughly, whatever it was, 25, 30 yards for goal. And when you see how Edinburgh set up, it almost looked like bear in mind, they'd already got the equaliser with less than 10 minutes to go. But the way they set up for that free kick, it almost looks like they're still trying to get the equaliser. Like, it feels like they are desperate to get the winner, when actually they probably... Like, I felt like if that went to extra time, you would expect Edinburgh to be the better team over that kind of additional 30 minutes. So even if you didn't have to rush everything. You don't have to get everybody forward for a free kick in the last minute. And it was, like, you're right in terms of Mitchell giving the ball away. I mean, Camelin had a lot to do at that point. They still had to get maybe 65, 70 yards up the park. But it just felt like they were rushing things and getting everybody forward in the last minute, when actually it was fine. They didn't have to panic at that point.
It's great. That reminds me of, I remember doing a Pelly podcast a number of years ago with Rory Loy, talking about Falkirk losing the 2015 Scottish Cup final, and it's just bizarre because it just popped in my head. He said the same thing. If you remember, in that match, Inverness Caledonian Thistle were reduced to 10 men, and Falkirk, it could have been anything. Listen, we've got another 30 minutes of this. Let's get it to the end of the 90 and let's go again. But Falkirk were just really keen to go and get the winner. And then there's I think it was David McCracken slips in the middle of the park, and Jamie McDonald kind of botches his save, and then Falkirk do not win the Scottish Cup. So just sense of relief there with that one. I still think Edinburgh will be fine. Still think they'll be fine in the league, but it's one of those things where sometimes if the circumstances are a bit dubious and things are generally going all right, you can get away with it. But it's one of those things. It's like you get away with it until you don't get away with it, and I think this is one of the instances where they didn't get away with it.
I do think they will be okay, but not if they continue to run as is. However, I think what Michael McIndoe said afterwards was, he said something like, listen, we're no daft. We know we need to bring in additional bodies. He said something about maybe bringing 3 or 4 in January if they're able to bring in that number of additions, then great, because they desperately need it, and hopefully it gives them, like, not just numbers but quality as well, because it's like we're into December now. There's still quite a gap there between them and the rest. So I know we always speak quite positive of them, but it's they've still got quite a bit to do.
They do, and I have no doubt they'll manage to do it. always. I'll be fine with Michael McIndoe and the Citizens until the last garrison. But listen, if Camelin and Edinburgh, that was maybe seen as a bit banana skin, I think most people would have fancied Clydebank to get the better Stranraer at Stair Park. Now, I'm not a bookmaker. My name isn't William Hill. My name's Craig Telfer. But I reckon the Lowland League leaders would have really been the favourites to progress into the fourth round, but instead it's the Blues who are in the hat. And I think the big winner from this one is deflected goals, because both Stranraer's goals, the first one was a David Syme own goal, and the second, the winner, it was Darren Lang. It took a massive deflection his way into the net. So thank goodness for the big legs of Clydebank's defenders, because that's ultimately what allowed Stranraer to go into the hat for the next round.
Yeah, I thought that Clydebank had a brilliant chance of winning this one, and watched the highlights back. But again, on another day, I think they might have done. Like, I thought they were hugely unfortunate not to get the win after 90 minutes. I do think, and again, obviously Stranraer's highlights are very thorough. It felt like maybe in the additional time, in terms of the extra time, Stranraer maybe got maybe grew into the game a wee bit more, albeit Clydebank still missed opportunities. But it was interesting listening to Chris Aitken, as much as he kind of suggested that they were quite fortunate, but like he was kind of directly asked. The question might have been, do you think the better team got through to the next round on the day? And he kind of fumbled. Like, it was very much kind of he didn't want to answer the question directly, which is just one of those weird things that managers do when it's like just be honest, just say, actually, we're really lucky today. We're really lucky. But he didn't want to say that at all, which I thought was quite interesting. Regardless, Stranraer had good fortune, but I suppose it augurs well from a Clydebank perspective in terms of moving forward for the league campaign, and then like if they do play the team that finishes 42nd, then it based on Saturday, whoever it is, they would give a very good game if they could get past the Highland League club.
The thing that really annoyed me about this game was I knew how the scoring in the game went. That Stranraer took the lead, Clydebank equalised, Darren Lang would get the winner. There's a chance it falls to Clydebank in the first half. And I was actually I was watching my laptop thinking, what are you doing? It goes to, I think it's Nicky Little, goes to, and all he needs to do, he's unmarked at the back post. You're thinking, well, hit the thing first time with your left foot, and it goes in. Instead, he tries to control the ball on his right foot, and by that time, the cover's over there, and I think Josh Lane's able to make the save, or it's clear to one of the two. But regardless, I think that's the sort of thing that differentiates the level from players. Now we're trying to be like Nicky Little has been amazing for Clydebank. You know, you think he's their record top goal scorer. So far be for me to tell Nicky Little what to do. But I think that for other players, when you come up a level, you need to be a bit more ruthless with it. The fact you need to go with your bad foot, and if you're just like one-footed all the time, you know, it might be great when you're playing Gallifrey, Dean, for instance. This is Stranraer we're talking about here, mate. This is Stranraer.
No, but you're right, but it's interesting in terms of, because I noticed that against in this game, and then another game where it was, and we'll probably talk about Highland League clubs in general, but the Annan Bucky game, and again I think it was 0-0 or maybe 1-0, and Bucky had a great chance forward right in front of goal and kind of spun that opportunity. And you're right in terms of, yes, when you're on top in these games against a team from a division above, kind of have to make the most of these moments, and they don't, and then ultimately it costs them.
Indeed. Got to see the red card. I know that there was a sense of disbelief with that. The red card. I think it was it Aaron Hodge, the player that was dismissed sort of late on in the match.
Yes,
aye, Aaron Hodge. But I mean, it's like you absolutely thump the boy, and then you kind of you deliberately trample on him. You know, you can try and get away one that you were stumbling, but it's quite obvious you don't need to put your foot there, especially when the referee's about 10 yards away from you watching you.
Yes, so I thought that was a red card. I didn't think that. Who was the player that it was suggested he'd been punched?
Oh, I didn't. I mean, I didn't see that in the score.
I mean, there was a big kind of. There was a bit of a furore in terms of like players all get involved from like the bench and a big kind of huddle of players, a melee, and it was suggested that somebody was punched. I'm not entirely sure they did. I think they may have made a meal of it. But regardless, I thought the red card was warranted.
Yeah, definitely. So well done to Stranraer. That was a sticky match, and they managed to get the better of it. And Shaughan, we'll stick with the theme of League 2 teams who progressed in extra time, and we'll celebrate Elgin City's 4-2 win over Stirling Albion. This was really extraordinary stuff at Borough-Briggs. Having trailed by 2-1 for most of the second half, Jack Murray equalised in the 96th minute to force extra time. Kane Hester would put Elgin ahead, and Murray got his second of the game 12 minutes later to ensure the win. And I suppose the big winner for this is Jack Murray. You know, I think he's been, like Alan Hale, brackets left, has made a number of smart signings since he took charge of Elgin City, and just been rewarded earlier today with a new contract that's going to take him and his backroom staff up to the end of the 2028 season. So great for him. But it feels like Murray's been the best signing that he's made. And he was certainly rewarded. I mean, the scrappiest of scrappy goals there to equalise the game. And just like a big thumping header just to put the tin lid on it. Really good stuff.
Yeah, you're right. He's been a great signing. I suggested this game just because of like the fact that Elgin's equaliser hit the back of the net in like the 96th minute. And the fact that Elgin have, like, there's been such a turnaround in terms of the start of the season where I actually wondered if there might have been a bit of bother this season. But actually, they've been absolutely fine and on a bit of a tear. And Saturday was a continuation of that, albeit in very dramatic circumstances, I suppose. But you're right in terms of Murray being a great signing. The only disappointing thing for this was the highlights, which seemed to have been filmed in almost total gloom. Like, you could barely see anything.
It's like, what time did this game kick off at? 9 o'clock in the evening. I noticed that as well. I think I'd like turning the brightness on my laptop up as far as I could go so I could make out the ball. You know what I mean? You see Murray's equaliser. You know, I don't know where it is in England. It's called like Royal Shrovetide football, where there's like about 500 villagers like just turn up and they just scrap to get this ball from one part of the town to the other, and they're absolutely punching lumps out of each other. That's what the equaliser did. I mean, there's Tam Ritchie's up, the goalkeeper. He's up to try and have a shot there. It's daft, and it's great to see the celebrations were brilliant. And it's just Elgin City are on a real hot streak just now. I mean, don't want to get too carried away, but are Elgin dark horses to win the title? Would you say? Would you bracket them up alongside Spartans and East Kilbride and Clyde? I thought, how did that steward get on the pitch? No, Clyde are only 4 points off. It's been a while since we talked about Stenhousemuir Football Club, so we're going to do that right now. The Warriors thumped Clacknacuddon 4-1 at Oco View. Mikey Anderson and Ross Taylor scored before Finlay Gray netted a brace, and the game was well and truly over and done with before Harry Nicholson pulled one back for the visitors with quite a nice taken goal from a free kick. A lot of strong performances from the Warriors. Gray, Anderson, Nicky Jameson back in business, which is great after a couple of weeks out. But I think I'd like to single Shaughan Leighton Grant out in particular for praise. Just a bit of a potted history for Leighton Grant. He'll be a name familiar to Stirling Albion supporters because I think he spent the bulk of last season on loan at Forth Bank from Rangers. He's a 19-year-old, just fundamentally a good footballer. I think he can play anywhere across the back, and he can also play in central midfield as well. So he's a bit of a utility man. But I think he'd impressed at Stirling Albion last season. Not quite what Rangers are looking for, although God knows what Rangers are looking for at the moment. And he left Ibrox in the summer there, and I think he was looking to try and explore opportunities playing overseas that didn't quite come to fruition. So Martin Christie, Stenhousemuir's director of football and recruitment specialist, he was able to bring him in on a short-term contract. And I'd seen fits and starts of him, but this is the first time that I'd actually seen him from the beginning of a game. And I've got to say, I think he's brilliant. I think he's just first and foremost, just a really good football player. I think I would describe him as a bit of a Swiss Army knife in the middle of the park. I mean, he's not going to drive forward with you, so he's probably like a Swiss Army knife where the spoon's broken, you know. But in terms of being able to break up play, to keep things simple, to dictate tempo, and his long range passing was really good as well. A number of times he was able to spread the balls out to the wings for Ewan O'Reilly or for Ross Taylor to run to. And it was the first time I actually seen him thinking, this guy's a smashing player. I think we should be looking to try and keep him on beyond his contract and at least keep him to the end of the season, because he's definitely got something about him. And I think that having a guy there that can cover effectively 4 different positions and be quite comfortable doing it, I think that's a huge boon for a team like Stenhousemuir. It could be. I mean, it's always, you've got to really count for the calibre of the opposition. I mean, you've seen, not to take anything away, but you just look at Finlay Gray's goals in the game. One of them's like a long ball from Michael Anderson that the defence and goalkeeper kind of getting a fankle with, and he's just allowed to nip. He's like somebody, when 2 people are speaking in front of a door and somebody goes, "Oh, excuse me," and kind of nips between them. It was like that. And the fourth goal, his second, it's a really nice goal. Like he slaloms between them, but he's like, maybe less of a slalom, more like a ski jump, where you're just heading in one direction, and he finishes. So Clark weren't very good, but Leighton Grant was really good, and that's someone that I'd like to see more of. I think he actually started against East Fife Which was Stennismuir lost that one. In fact, it was him that scored their own goal. I mean, I wouldn't be too harsh on him with the ball sort of hitting off his back from a corner. But seeing him here in the midfield, and it's good that he's moved in there. There's injuries to Finn Robson's missing, Scott McGill's missing, so he's able to step in and play alongside Michael Anderson. I thought their styles complemented each other very well. So hopefully Stenny are in discussions with him, because I think he's got something to offer. Aye, no, that's the only annoying thing. We're very fortunate at the moment that things are going so well on the pitch, because off the pitch it's not great at the moment. One of the directors' boy, Johnny Thompson, was basically left. I mean, I don't think it was not his choice, but he left, and he's a Stennismuir supporter first and foremost. He's been involved with the club as long as I have. He's a businessman from the local area who's done pretty well, and he's put a lot of money into the club, and he's no longer with it. So the moment, the concern is, and there's not a lot of communication coming out of the club at the moment, but the concern is that we are just at the behest of one man, our chairman and principal sponsor. And well, that is great if things are going well, but all it just takes is him to say, well, I don't want to be involved anymore, and then suddenly the money dries up. That's your sole income stream, or certainly your major income stream, is no longer there, and the club would suffer off the back of that. So I'm hoping that Stennismuir get a bit of clarity, or certainly the supporters are given a bit of clarity and a bit of insight into what actually is going on there, because the last 12 months have been a bit tumultuous, from having gone effectively with the same people running the club for years to all these changes happening. It's a little disconcerting. And I think the fact that the team are doing so well at the moment takes a bit of heat away from that. You'll know yourself, when the team aren't doing well on the pitch, suddenly people will try and look for people to point the finger at. And so the fact that Gary Naismith and Bomber Ferguson and Martin Christie and all the players seem to be punching above their weight at the moment, it keeps that at bay for now. But like I say, I do want to find out exactly what's going on, because it's a concern. I don't like it. I don't like it. Mm. Mm. Here. But Shaughan, you touched on Clacknacuddon's poor performance, and Clacknacuddon were pretty mediocre. I think you could tell within the first couple of minutes. I think when Ross Taylor ran at one of them and the guy completely panicked, you're thinking, ooh, this mob don't look up to much. I think the one of the losers from the weekend, or certainly if you want to bunch them all together, that's probably the Highland League teams. All 5 teams entered, the 5 teams that entered the third round, and all 5 of them have been knocked out. Now, you've probably got some degree of sympathy for Turriff United and Bankside. They're taking on full-time championship opposition and Ayr United and Ross County respectively. And maybe you say Clack had a hard game against Stennismuir, given they're having a good season. But then you look at like Brechin City would have really fancied their chances against Kelty Hearts. And I think Bucky Thistle going down, it's a long way to go, but you're taking on a badly understrength and an athletic. You'd have seen that as doable. And for Kelty to win quite comfortably and Annan to absolutely paste Bucky, I think I don't like, I'm going to use the term non-league truthers, but I've not used that for a long time. But it feels like, when people say there's not much of a difference between the SPFL and the outside of football, I think broadly speaking that is the case, and I think it was shown up a wee bit here with the Highland League teams doing as badly as they did. Mm.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
Yes, when you explain it like that, I think you're right. I'm going back to 2 years ago. Stennisby were knocked out the Scottish Cup by Brora Rangers, and it says you were pretty poor in that game. So I think coming into this one, maybe because it's the specific circumstances, you're coming into a team that were second in the Highland League and thinking, we really need to take this seriously here, otherwise we're going to come a cropper. But the fact that Clack didn't really offer much at all. They had a couple of chances in the half, but I think it was mostly from Stennisby being a bit overconfident with the ball, giving it away in daft places. But certainly as an attacking force, they just couldn't really live with Taylor and O'Reilly and Gray and Carrick. They lost a bit of our slickness. Carrick had to go off and was replaced by Matty Aitken, who doesn't have quite the same technique or guile as Carrick does. But then if they were able to break that press, they had Anderson and Grant in front of them, who just really kept everything at bay. And I was expecting a wee bit more from Clack. At one point, there was a shout, I think it was one of my mates, Big Dave, that shouted, "You're no playing Rothis now, Clack!" Which I thought which is quite funny. But there is a gulf. There is a gulf. Yes, and I suppose that. But then would we say, no, I would say the same thing. There is a gulf because Auchinleck Talbot beating Dumbarton. I wouldn't say, it's the between the west of Scotland and the SPFL is really, really tight. I would never say that off the back of that one result. Yeah, maybe. I'll be honest, the Auchinleck team, the names, when I go through that team, Willie Muir, the goalkeeper, who was formerly at Queen's Park, I know him. Luke Main, the sort of attacking midfielder, I only know him when I went to see Auchinleck Talbot versus Cumnock. He was someone that really caught the eye. He's a really good player. But other than that, I can't say I know too much about their squad, but I suppose that's the only way you can put them in the same division and get them to play 36 times. I remember that Scottish Cup time when Stennisby were knocked out by Pennycook Athletic back in 2019 it was, and there's not much difference between the East of Scotland League and the SFL. It's like, mate, there's a huge difference. There's an absolute enormous difference. Like if that Pennycook team played in League 2, they would be eaten up and spat out. I'm telling you. You got lucky once. I'm trying to think, what's the IRA quote about Margaret Thatcher? You got lucky. We got lucky once. You need to be lucky all the time. Aye, something like that. I mean, I don't want to compare Pennycook Athletic to the worst Prime Minister of all time, but I will do it for the purposes of this podcast. Now, Shaughan, the biggest losers, probably the biggest losers, Ayr United's inability to have a laugh. Now, there was most people, if you're online, you've probably heard this, but there was an incident at half-time between Ayr United and Turriff United at Somerset Park. I think Ayr United won that comfortable 3-0 winners in that game. But I'm going to read the parts of the statement that was published on the Ayr United website. As part of its partnership with the Ayrshire Youth Football League, the club has welcomed a number of teams to celebrate their on-field success at Somerset Park by presenting various trophies and allowing teams to complete a lap of honour in front of home fans, which has been very well received by all clubs from across Ayrshire. Unfortunately, an adult from a local club took it upon himself to use this as an opportunity not to celebrate his team's success, but to incite a reaction from the home supporters, which not only contravened stadium and ground regulations, but also put the young people in his care at unnecessary risk. And if you're thinking, my God, what did he do? Did he maybe throw pyro into the crowd? Did he maybe make a nasty gesture? No, he took off his track jacket and a Kilmarnock top on underneath. I think the WWE should be looking to sign this guy up because this guy knows how to work a crowd. This guy is an absolutely top tier heel. Absolutely astonishing stuff. The statement on the United website continued. This will undoubtedly result in a change to the way trophy presentations are handled going forward, which will be to the detriment of those who are recognised in the future, however. Ayr United will continue to utilise its partnerships to engage with groups and young people from across Ayrshire and won't let the mindless behaviour, I think he was very mindful actually, of one individual deter us. This has become a police matter and the club has been liaising with Police Scotland over the weekend as continuing to assist them with their inquiries. Oh. I like mindless. No, that's actually class. I reckon as soon as when he found out that he planned it. I just quite like the idea of Police Scotland going around his house. It's like John Doe's from Seven, just diary entries, pages and pages of diary entries talking about how he could not wait to wear his Kilmarnock top on the pitch at Somerset Park. Imagine. Imagine the rush he must have got when he unzipped his tracky top. Oh, incredible! Like yes, yeah. What's the first line is in Goodfellas? As soon as I grew up, I knew I wanted to run on the pitch at Somerset Park wearing my Kilmarnock top. Listen, Mr. Scorsese, if you're listening to this podcast, and I've no doubt that you are, get it written up. Get it written up. Now, Shaughan, we mentioned we were looking at we're going to finish up by looking at the draw for the fourth round. I think the two big ties that stick out, certainly from a lower league perspective, Auchinleck Talbot versus Celtic and Annan Athletic travelling to Ibrox to take on Rangers. Money. I suppose what I meant by interesting is from an athletic perspective, this is a club who were really struggling. I think early in the season when there was a big, talking about Stennis Muir turning their board over. I think there's a lot of people left Annan Athletic en masse. So this is the result. I mean, I'm going to assume it's going to be broadcast on Premier Sports as well. So Annan will be in line for a bit of a windfall for this one. And I think that's like a massive cash injection to keep them forward. Whereas Auchinleck, I mean, historically, I don't know if they've ever played Celtic in the past. This could be one of the biggest games in their history. I hope that the game gets to take place at Beechwood. As far as I know, Beechwood's licensed. It can accommodate like a number of fans. And I think that it's been for some of the more rowdier elements from like the West of Scotland teams that Talbot will have played in the past. I think they'll be able to accommodate boisterous crowds. It's just whether or not Police Scotland, because it's Celtic, because of the farrago that goes alongside that, they might want to move the game to, I don't know, Rugby Park, for instance, which I hope's not the case. Yeah, Neil Lennon returning to his, beg your pardon, Neil Lennon returning, Neil Lennon welcoming his former club into it. So that'll be a good game. I think that Hibs can be got at. There's certainly some good players in Ajax, but I think we've seen in recent weeks they can be got at. Whereas Dunfermline can be got at as well. They're a really fun team to watch. I think there's a real youthfulness and vibrancy to it. They're certainly not the perfect side, but that'll make for a good game. We mentioned about Stennismuir taking on Greenock Morton at home. Disappointed with that one, to be honest. Played Greenock, played Morton earlier in the season, lost that match 3-0 at Capello, albeit that was Stennismuir with like a handful of players that they had to really patch the team together for that. I wanted Hibs away or Hearts away. Those are the games I would really want, because it's like a day out in Edinburgh. You get to see your pals. You can take the train through, etc., etc. If not, Rangers and Celtic away for the bounty, but Morton away, and it's not the most presentable tie, not the most difficult tie you're ever likely to face. But at the same token, probably like 4 times out of 5, you're probably going to lose it. The only thing is this has come during Morton, the middle third of Morton's season, so we know what happens. We all know what happens at this point. Rovers away at Aberdeen. Yeah, there's a couple of interesting ties. Camelin, who we mentioned after their win over Edinburgh City, they were awarded with a home tie against Elgin City. Doable, but I think that the way Elgin are playing at the moment, you'd probably back Elgin to do it, especially when you saw how that match against Edinburgh played out. Yeah, some ass ties, unfortunately. Kilmarnock versus Dundee, Airdrie versus are both teams from the same divisions. At this stage, boring. Livingston St Mirren, ass. Hearts versus Falkirk. Ugh. Motherwell versus Ross County, not great. Yes. the neutrals, the ones who we should be really thinking of in these circumstances. But Shaughan, I think that'll probably do us for the winners and losers of the third round of the Scottish Cup. Yeah, that'll hold the SOBs for another week. Now, if you've enjoyed what you've heard, please do consider subscribing to our Patreon. There's a heck of a lot of content on there, and you can access it all for as little, well, not all, but you can access it for as little as £2 per month. Patreon.com/Terrace Podcast. Shaughan teased it earlier, but we are about to go and record a show detailing our experiences at the SPFL Manager of the Month voting dinner earlier in the week. This is very much our version of Succulent Lamb, which was delicious, by the way, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So patreon.com/Terrace Podcast. Get over there just now, and we will give you our shoot thoughts on what was a really entertaining and really fun night. But Shaughan, thank you very much for hanging out with me. And you, the listener, thank you for hanging out with me. No problem, Craig. See you at the next one. And enjoy your football, but unlike YouTube sensation Blair McNally, who bounced around the pitch with the Camelon fans when they got their winner against Edinburgh City on Saturday, please do so respectfully. That annoyed you, didn't it? Exactly. It's just YouTube, mate. It's just YouTube. Just enjoy it. Anyway, take care. Thank you very much.